A transition plan is not just a webinar form. Transition to Adulthood, webinar on March 14th, 2023, presented by Dana Perry, Family Resource Specialist from the PEAL Center. Disclaimer, the ARC of Lehigh Northampton County's Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any other provided by the ARC's Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply the endorsement, recommendation, or favoring of the providing party or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. I would like to introduce Diana Perry, who has over 20 years of education, advocacy, and family leadership experience. She is a family resource specialist for the PEAL Center in Philadelphia. In addition, she work at the PEAL Center. Diana serves as a vice chair of the state special education advisory panel. She has a son, David, who is now 29, if I'm correct. Right? I'm sure she'll correct me.
Just turned 30 a couple weeks ago.
Oh, there we go. Received special education services when he was in school, and I'm sure she'll definitely have more to talk about on him during the presentation today. So thank you again for your time this evening, and the Zoom is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. And I now have, being that I'm sharing my screen, I have that option to see the chat now too. So if you are chatting, I'll be able to see that now and respond to you. All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. As Kodi mentioned, I am the Family Resource Specialist at the PEAL Center. And what that means is, as a Family Resource Specialist, I help families navigate the special education system, understanding your rights, the processes, forms, anything that has to do with special education. Kind of the same type of work that all of you get to experience from the ARC as well, from the advocates there. And but I also get to do trainings like this, which is always nice, so I get to be with other people as well. Of course, we used to do that in person, but now doing it virtually, you know, works just as fine. And so, yeah, we're here to talk tonight about a transition plan is not just a form. And yes, my son David will be, I'll be sharing stories throughout, because my love for transition came to me through him. I always like to give him the kudos of giving me my career as well in the work that I do. And he's taught me so much throughout advocating for him while he was in school, and him sharing with me what his life wanted to be as he got older. So yes, I will share some of those with you. Yeah, the PEAL Center, if some of you are unaware of what the PEAL Center is, our mission is to educate and empower families to ensure that children, youth, and young adults with disabilities and special healthcare needs lead rich, active lives as full members of their schools and communities. And the PEAL Center is what's called a PTI, a Parent Training and Information Center. And what that means is that in the law, in IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it is federally mandated that every state must have a PTI. So in Pennsylvania, it is the PEAL Center. So we are statewide. I work out of our Philadelphia office, and we have an office in Pittsburgh. So we straight across the state. And then we have a spattering of all my colleagues throughout the rest of the state, all over, working remotely. Some actually come in the Philly office, and some also go into the Pittsburgh office. But We have several employees. We seem to keep on growing and growing, which is awesome. And so we also have a youth department. We have a good handful of youth coordinators that work across the state as well, and they work directly with youth. They do youth leadership institutes. They talk with youth. You know, and they hold different kind of events virtually and in person. They go to schools and work directly with students, helping them with leadership, you know, helping them get their voice, helping them understand what does it mean to advocate for themselves. So it's wonderful to work with them as we go through, particularly transition. So, okay. So as we move through the PowerPoint, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I may or may not be able to look at it. I mean, I know I have access to it now, but as I'm presenting, sometimes it could be more of a distraction to me. I also know that there were a couple questions submitted ahead of time. So I'll try and filter, you know, give some answers as we go through. I know one was in particular about resources. So you'll definitely get lots of resources tonight. I'm here with a panelist of wonderful resources at your fingertips right in front of us. But at the end of my PowerPoint, I also will have listed several different agencies and that you might be able to navigate during if your child is going through the transition process, or if your student is going through that transition process. I know there was also a question around waivers. I'll get that probably towards the end as well. And then there was one other question I know that talked about, you know, what are the benefits of what they call banking your diploma, walking with your class, but then staying within the district until you're age 21. Because if you have an IEP and if you have various goals and needs and things like that, then it may really benefit your student to stay till they're age 21. But I'm also going to talk about some other things that could benefit someone to stay. And when I talk to families about that, because that's a very common question. When I talk to families about that, you know, it's really an individual family decision, student decision, to really decide, you know, what works best for that individual. Because, you know, once they walk with their class, as I tell families and students, it's not like you go back to school, you know, after you graduate. You know, you're in the transition phase, and that's the pieces I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is what happens, you know, on that IEP and that transition section, and, you know, what are the different things that can be happening during that time frame of walking with your class and to age 21. And what other benefits are there, you know? I mean, so I'm going to talk about some of that as well as I go through the presentation. So hopefully you'll get some more information around that, and maybe some more ideas as far as what might work best for you as a family and your student or your child. So, and part of that is, you know, one of the points here that I'm going to talk about is, you know, having a vision to guide that whole transition planning, because that's what's going to help you answer those questions. You know, what is that vision? What is the hopes and dreams at the end that you really would like to be at once you exit the school district or you transition into adulthood? And, you know, and hopefully I'll be able to give you some various ideas around what that looks like. You know, what do you do on the IEP around the various transition sections as well? And of course, then I talked about the various resources that will be there at the end of the PowerPoint. And yes, I will be sharing the PowerPoint with the ARC, and they can share that out to everyone. So really, you know, I have to say, I might overwhelm you tonight, because transition, there's a lot of stuff that happens during transition. And I'm going to be talking a lot about various things. So, you know, if you're taking notes, that's great. But, you know, and I'll be repeating different things too as we go through, because some things I just need to continue saying over and over what you may or what you might need to be doing, right? So I will be talking a lot around what's happening during transition. What do you need to do? What are some of those resources that are really going to help you and guide you? But before I start to get into all of that, I want to make sure that all of you know that every year, and this year it's in August, I believe it's August 9th and 10th, there is a transition conference every year. And it's held at the Penn Stater in Penn State. And I really, really encourage everyone to go to it because it is filled with all kinds of, it's filled with answers to your questions. So there's a great resource fair. So there's all kinds of agencies there to help you and guide you and answer any questions about transition. I think there was an insurance question or waivers, you know, there's going to be agencies there to talk about all that. There's going to be sessions that on every topic. I mean, actually, we submitted several sessions from the PEAL Center, but my favorite one, which hopefully I'll be doing with my colleagues, is student-led IEPs. You know, what does it mean for your student to really lead their IEP? What does that look like? So I'm not going to talk a lot about that tonight, but I really do encourage that students lead their own IEP meetings, particularly when you get to transition. But the other thing at that transition conference, if you're a parent, and I know there was several parents here tonight, you get to meet all these other parents across the state. And my suggestion is to bring your student, bring your child with you, because there's youth tracks. So they also get to meet a whole bunch of youth across the state. And all of the youth and the families, you know, they all have children right in the transition. So you always have something relatable with everybody that you're going to be meeting at the transition conference. David and I loved it. We went almost every year, I think. And then as I progressed in my career, he also presented with me at a few sessions early on as well. So one of the things that I did a lot with David was building that vision for the future, you know, really thinking about what's that endpoint. Because if you know what your endpoint is, what do you need to do to get there? And that's why it's so important to really be thinking about what's that future. Do you want to go to college? Do you want to live on your own? Do you want to get married? Do you want to, you know, finance your own home or go into an apartment? You know, what's all that look like? So what's that future look like? What are those hot things that you want to do? And then how are you going to advocate for yourself for all of that? So it's really, that's what transition is all about. Yes, you're still taking subjects, you're still in classes, absolutely. And when you're in high school, a lot of times they have some really cool classes to take, right? They have maybe some financial classes, they have, you know, things about, you know, living on your own, hopefully, you know, there's just all kinds of different topics, hopefully of interest around transitioning. And the other piece about transition is building that support around you. Because I've always been very clear that I may not be here for David, you know, as he gets older. I mean, he's getting older and so am I, right? So if I'm getting older, you know, the thought is that, you know, I'm going to pass someday, and I mean, me and his father, and, you know, David needs that circle of support around him. So I have, when he was younger, I tried to continue to build and build and build on that. And I give and hope. And now he has a lot of those tools and resources that he now continues to build his own support. He knows a lot of other people that I don't know. And that's a good thing, because, you know, any other 30-year-old who doesn't have a disability, I don't know all, you know, like my other child, my oldest child, I don't know, you know, all the circles of people. So, and I shouldn't, right? I mean, you know, you want to know some people, but, you know, so that's really important as well as I go through navigating transition and talking about that tonight. Okay, thank you for putting in the information on the conference. All right, now I can just get my screen to work. There we go. So I put this resource up on the screen. It's the very first one, and it's the Transition Discoveries website. This website was developed by parents, by youth, and also professionals. But the youth and the family's voice really echoes through this whole website. And actually, years ago, when they first started, before they even got to the website, they talked about various components of what were the main pieces? And I'm blanking on the actual word. Targets, it's not targets, but what are the main pieces that we want in transition? So, we were in different focus groups and everything, and David and I participated in that. So, and there were several other families and youth and everything, what were those indicators? That's what it was. What were those indicators that are really important? So I'm going to talk about some of those indicators that are on this website. But it's a great website to navigate. It's very easy to navigate. And I love, there's a whole bunch of like different videos on here. They're only like maybe a minute or two, but they really give you some great information real quick about certain things. So I really encourage everyone to check out this website and see, what's out there that might be helpful. So one of the indicators is family engagement. That was, really important that families are engaged in this transition process. And again, that's all about thinking big. That's starting with that vision. What is that vision for the family or for the student? What does your youth's life look like? Does it entail, having their own car, getting their driver's license, being successful in some particular career? Is there a certain faith that they practice? Is there a religion or anything that, and what really inspires them to what motivates them? And what does that look like in a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, what's that look like? You know what? Because you can have those hopes and dreams, and then the avenue that you take to get there is going to go up and down and sideways and so forth, but you're still working towards that, which is wonderful. So, there's different tools out there, person-centered tools. That's another lingo word, person-centered. And these person-centered tools really help engage the family to think about this. It also is an opportunity to utilize these tools to bring in those other people, bring in the social network that you're hopefully building for your student or for yourself. And they're there to help you through, what does that look like in 2 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years? And what does it look like now? What do I need to do tomorrow? So there's different tools out there. We use the tool PATH, P-A-T-H. And that was really helpful for us in assisting David and for his future. So you might be thinking, why is it important for, someone to take charge and to be a self-advocate? Why is that important for youth? Well, there's several different reasons why. And again, this may also speak as to why is it important to stay till you're 21? Because if your child is not advocating for themselves, if they're going to college or going to be out there in life, they need to know how to navigate all that. They need to understand their disability. And they need to tell people what's important to them and what do they really want, instead of an agency or somebody saying, well, this is what you should be doing. And this is what, you get, quite frankly, you probably get a lot of that in school, hopefully not too much as you get older. But yeah, and you need to, you're going to be working with various agencies once you leave the school system. And that's another biggie. When you're in a school system, you're entitled, right? You're a taxpayer. It's, it's the law. They need to teach you, you get all those resources that are on the IEP. Once you leave the district, all that's gone. And now you need to start working with other agencies, and those other agencies, you got to apply. And do you qualify for it? You're not entitled to it anymore, right? So it's, you need to really apply and see if you actually are approved for different services. Do you qualify based on your disability or where you're at and things like that? So it's really important, programs are eligibility based instead of that entitlement, right? So that's another reason, right? And, I used to hear a lot when Dave was in school, oh, you're just going to fall off the cliff, right? You're going to fall off this cliff after you leave high school and so forth. Now, mind you, I like to talk. I like to, get to know people. I knew a lot of people, and I was working in the field. So I'm like, yeah, we got this. David and I got, we're okay. We're good. I still fell off the cliff, even though I was connected to so many different, and I knew where to go and issues, there were still a lot of things that just didn't work out because you're not with a school system. You're so used to that school system for so many years and how it works. And now for David, he had all these other agencies we had to navigate and understand. And when this happened, what do you do when this happened? So it's a lot. It is, and I don't mean to overwhelm you, but in the end, these are so helpful for our students, for our young people with disabilities to utilize these services. And so that brings me to one of the next indicators, which is youth development and those self-advocacy. You know, what are your rights and responsibilities as you get older? You know, when you have, you know, what are those differences of that, the legal system from being a school student to now when you turn 18, right? You know, when David turned 18, it was like, uh-oh, you know, he gets to do blah, 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 because he's an adult, right? He has legal responsibilities now. You know, if he gets arrested, you know, he's an adult, you know, things like that. Thank God he's never gotten arrested, but, you know, but there are, I mean, and there are laws that, you know, protect a person from discrimination if you have a disability, but you're going to need to know and understand that. What are your rights and responsibilities? This is all about self-advocacy, understanding what your rights and responsibilities are. You know, do you, if you're not getting a driver's license, are you getting that state picture ID, or now the, what is it? The real ID, I guess you should probably get, right? You know, I keep thinking about that. I'm going to have to update the PowerPoint because, you know, that's happening, I think in 2025 or something, they've extended it. But anyway, I sometimes don't even understand all that, but, you know, and how do you make different, you know, decisions around medical or finances? And for us, and I'm not going to get into too much detail about this, but for us and knowing our son, David, you know, and his disability and how it affects him, he's very vulnerable. We could see that people would take advantage of him financially, and maybe even medically. I don't know, but, you know, we decided as a family to get power of attorney for finances and medical for David, you know, so that we were there, so that, you know, if the doctor wanted to do something or had some, you know, information, you know, David, you know, is like, you know, has allowed me as his parent to be there. You know, I give him his privacy, but then there's also times that, you know, sometimes we need to talk together with the doctor, and David gives permission because I am the power of attorney. And finances, God forbid somebody, you know, says to him, hey, David, you know, let's go apply for this credit card and then we can go shopping and do this, you know, that happens. That happens, you know, probably more often than we want to believe. So that gives me the power of attorney to say, you know, like I can get him out of some of the trouble because of, you know, having that, some of that legal pieces. So, but these are all things, as you know, as you're going through transition, you need to be thinking about. You know, and school doesn't tell you all of these things because they're still working on that IEP. They're still working on academics, or they're getting you ready for life. So, you know, it's the other resources and people that come into play. Now, I know this is very small for everybody to see, but I put this up here because Planning for the Future checklist is a really great guide. Student and family centered planning. So person-centered planning, again, it's those tools that I talked about a little earlier that we used for David. We used the PATH planning process. There's also other planning tools that are out there. I know from the Pennsylvania Family Partnership, the PA Family Partnerships. They Family Network, they have a tool that they use as well. So there's different, you can even just Google person-centered planning and different tools will come up. But it really revolves around that person. What do they like? What do they don't like? And what are their dreams? How can we help them and support them to make and really work towards those dreams? So, and when you think about it, so when I think back when we started doing these, you know, paths for David, you know, he was a part of it, but I probably, you know, gave most knowledge, or some of the people that came to his path, you know, they gave some things too. But as David got older, he took more ownership of, you know, what he wanted, how he wanted it, asking for help. You know, this is that first step of helping them and understand that they have a voice. And no matter no matter how your student or your child communicates, it can always work out. There's always ways to work out with the individual and getting their voice to the table. So we can always figure that out. So I talk about transition planning, but you know, you still know that you're still in school. Your student is still in school. Your child is still in school. They still have an IEP, right? And that's the law. So that means that, you know, whatever is on that IEP, they need to follow. It's an important legal document. And, you know, I say that because this IEP becomes really important as you get into transition, because there is the specific section for transition. And again, I'll be referencing those sections as I go through the presentation tonight, because it's really important to understand that document and know that, you know, they should be reaching these goals, right? And if they're making goals, and and the other piece to this is when you're doing that person-centered planning and whatever you're working on, you can bring that to the table to an IEP meeting, and you can even have the school people attend it. But, you know, attend the path planning or whatever process you might be using, because then you use that information to develop maybe new goals for the future for your child or your student. And that is one of the other handouts is what's called the annotated section of the transition section. So the IEP itself, the whole IEP, there is an annotated version, right? So that means that annotated version, it goes through each section of the IEP, and it gives you ideas of what you should be talking about in this section of the IEP. What are ideas? What do we need to be doing? Things like that. So what I send is the actual transition section of that annotation. So you can get more ideas of what should be talked about in all three sections of that, of the transition section of the IEP. One of the other things, you know, I started off by saying, you probably will get overwhelmed tonight because there's a lot of information around transition, right? And once you reach transition, you've been through many, 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 many IEPs by the time you reach 14 to 21, right? So now's the time that you just have one box for transition, okay? All the other stuff is great. You do need that in case you need it, but now you just want to file for all your transition stuff, right? Because you're going to be given so much information, and you're going to want to maybe file it very, you know, however you want to file it. You know, I used to say I have organized piles, and I think I probably continue to say I have organized piles. So I know where everything is, but you know, and as you go through that IEP and you're building your transition file, it's really important to know that some of the sections on the IEP, like the present levels, you know, you're really going to be needing to pay more closer attention to what are those post-secondary transition goals? What does that mean overarching, right? And if you just excuse me for 1 second, I will be right back. So living at home or doing presentations at home, right? You hear weird noises. So I just had to check on something. So I apologize. I am back. So the other section on the IEP is parental concerns. So I always talk to families. So listen, I'm a family resource specialist. A lot of people call me because, you know, things aren't going right. So when they call me and things aren't going right, you know, and I say, well, why don't you send me the IEP? I'll take a look at it. This is one of the first sections I look at, parental concerns. You know, is their voice on there? Are they voicing their concerns? Is it documented? So it's really important. There's various sections on the IEP, so I'm just highlighting certain ones. Then as you go through transition, and to maybe pay closer attention to them. All right, so when you're going through the IEP, right, and you're hitting that transition phase, you know, sometimes there are different assessments that need to be done, because now, you know, you're looking more at, you know, community life. You're looking at, you know, what does your future look like? What does college look like? You know, things like that. So there are, you know, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example of some of the informal assessments that, you know, you talk about as an IEP team that could be done or should be done, you know, to get more data, to get more information, to figure out what are the goals and activities that need to happen on the IEP. So, you know, and if you need to do any of these, I always like to, on this slide though, give a little plug for the PEAL Center. If you go to our website, the PEAL Center, there is a tab at the top for webinars or trainings or something like that. There are archived webinars. And if you click on that, you'll also see a little tab that says Transition Tuesdays. So I really encourage you to go to our website, and you could probably just put in the search engine, Transition Tuesday, and those webinars will come up. Now, I did these webinars. They are recorded. They're an hour long. And I did them with one of my wonderful colleagues, Michael Storr, who actually used to work in Pennsylvania, but now he works for the National Technical Assistance Center. And him and I, what we did is we broke down transition, right? Because like I said, transition's huge. There's lots of components to it. One of the sessions was specific just assessments. So we talk a lot about the various assessments and the different ones that are out there. There's some handouts that are with it. And in addition to that, we always had have a parent with us. We had a youth. So there were other people that presented with us. And so you're getting that information from a host of different people, the professionals, the families, the youth. And thank you for finding that on our website and putting it in the chat. You're awesome. So, so I really encourage you to, listen to any of those, recorded webinars. They're going to be helpful for you as you go through your transition phase or transition years in school. So, okay. So I said I was probably going to be doing a lot of repeating again, here's some things that I'm just going to repeat again. Transition planning is all about the student. So it really needs to be student focused, student driven. And that's why I always talk about student-led IEPs too. Their voice needs to be heard at that meeting. No matter how they communicate, it needs to be heard at that meeting. And it can be to any capacity, right? Some students are more nervous than others. Well, maybe they'll start finding their voice. Maybe they just want to come to the beginning of the IEP meeting and talk about, what they like and don't like about, their classes or whatever. It's not like they have to be there for the whole meeting. It really is up to the student and the family to decide, what does that really look like for them? So, transition is very student-centered, but it's also family-centered. And I know that the schools, they have a commitment, right? They have to go by the law. They have to give you that free, appropriate public education. And, and a lot of schools really do have some really good transition programs. So you really want to, know all your options, right? That's another thing. You really want to really look at everything. Look at all of your options. Just because the school might say, oh, well, we have this transition program, and when we do this, and this is what we do for this, and that might be all well and good, but is it student focused to your child, to your student? Does it really fit their needs? And if not, then you need to have conversation about that. How do we individualize that, right? That's why it's an IEP. That's what that I is, individualize. How do we individualize that transition pieces, the transition section for the student? So you start thinking about, what are the choices that you start making as you get older, right? You're thinking about, continuing education. Are you going to college? Are you a 2-year, a 4-year? Are you going to a tech school or, any kind of, specific related to whatever job you want to do? Are you just getting some training? Are you just going straight to work, right? If you're not ready for work, are you starting to volunteer yet? All these various things. What does community life look like? What are you doing with your friends and peers? And, what do you do at teenage years, right? Because what happens when I talked about that falling off the cliff sometimes those agencies don't start right away, and so there might be some lag time. So, you want to be able to use your time, but you want your time to be meaningful, right? You want to be able to continue having meaningful, participation in whatever, you are doing, whether it is going to college or going to work or hanging out with your friends. Everybody needs that reason to get out of bed like Garfield, right? Garfield, obviously he needs to get out of bed for his coffee in this little clip here. But Garfield gets out of bed every morning because he just likes to bug whatever that guy's name is that he lives with. So, that's his purpose. And when I talked earlier about that person-centered planning and what's that goal, what's that dream that you have, right? If you look at this slide and you see where the goal is, a veterinarian, right? There was a student who wanted to be a veterinarian, right? And we had to break it down because, there were one or two people that were thinking, I'm not so sure they could be a veterinarian. But if you break it down, you say, okay, well, what does that mean to become a veterinarian, right? Well, if you go back one spot, you need to go to veterinarian school for 4 years. But before that, you're going to have to graduate from a 4-year college and take biology and chemistry. They're going to be required. But before that, you're going to have to graduate from high school and probably take the SAT testing in order to go to college. So if you break it down, you can't just go from high school to being a veterinarian, right? So sometimes you have to be more visual in what those goals look like. I'm going to share a story. Here's one of my stories about David. And I know some of you have heard this before, so I apologize if you hear it again. But David, my son David, he wanted to drive, right? So when he was, he started very, David had goals, trust me, when he was younger, probably started in elementary to middle school. He wanted to move out. He didn't want to live with any of us anymore, and he just wants to move out. Well, he's still here, but we're still working on having to move out. But one of the other things he wanted to do was he wanted to get his driver's license. And several of us weren't quite sure if that would be a good thing for David to do, based on, his disability and where he was intellectually and just various things. A lot of people were like these naysayers around that. And I said, well, I'm not going to be the one to tell him he can't drive. And I didn't want anybody else to have to tell him he didn't, wasn't going to drive. So I let it go. That's going to be a goal. Let him do, what? Let him figure it out, right? He needs to figure that out for himself. So what did we do? We encouraged him to do what he needed to do to drive. What do you need to do? Well, you're going to have to start studying for your test, right? There's a lot to learn about driving when you're in a car. And when we were in the car, we talk about things, what you need to learn, what you need to do and stuff like that. And trust me, David's very good map wise. Like he knows where to go, like how we were getting places. So I was, not a lot of people can do that sometimes. But anyway, that's even without a disability. But David was studying for his driver's license. He got the book, he's studying it in school. They're doing the online testing and he's passing all those tests online. And I'm like, oh dear God, he's passing those tests. So, the next thing was, all right, well, you're going to have to go get your learner's permit. And, we explained to him what you need to do for that. For some reason, he lost interest. We never took him to get his learner's permit. We were ready to do so at different times, but he's like, no, I don't want to go. No, I don't want to go. I'm like, okay, all right, So, but you know what? He lost his own interest. It wasn't somebody saying and crushing his dream. Oh, well, you can't drive because you have Down syndrome, or you can't drive because no, it wasn't any of that. And I really encouraged people that we need to encourage him to learn how to drive if that's what he wants to do. But he chose that this was something that he didn't want to do. So that was good for him. But anyway, so I went off on a little tangent there for the story. But, I feel like it's important that, a lot of people, I hear a lot of students say what they want to do, and then I'll hear a teacher, even a family member sometimes say, well, I don't know if they can do that because they're not very good in math or, like all those different reasons. And that might be true. And you might know that, but let them decide, let them figure that out sometimes, right? Or sometimes on that journey, they figure out something else they want to do, right? And they get involved in that instead. So anyway, I say that because, various goals are on your through that section of the IEP in that transition section. So if a goal has been listed in any of those 3 areas, post-secondary, employment, or independent living, there has to be at least one activity, because you'll see underneath that transition section, you have your goals and then you have activities and services. You have to have at least one activity that's developed to address that IEP goal. And, this links that transition to the instruction of what needs to happen. Okay. So again, this is another indicator. We talked about the family, the youth. Well, there's actually an indicator that just says transition planning. And through that is employment. And what does employment look like, right? What does that look like for your student, for your child, what are you navigating? What kind of job are you thinking about? Do you want a career? What are your abilities, right? I like that last one in the corner, it's not yes, it is a disability. That's what they call it. And you need to, need those terms in order to qualify and to get different services as you move through this. But you really want to look at what are your abilities, what can you do? And anybody, no matter what gifts and talents they bring to the table, there's always a job. There's always a way to figure out what they can do, whether they're earning money or volunteering, but there's always something that you can do. Garfield, you need meaningful work to get out of it. But there are different types of employment. One type of employment is competitive employment, which is just a full or part-time work, and you're making minimum wage, and it's basically just a typical job, just like, I have a job at the PEAL Center, or, ARCs have the advocates, there's different jobs that everybody has. Now, there's another type called supported employment. And this is probably a little bit more that what my son, David, he works at the Olive Garden and he gets supported employment. So it is competitive work. He's, earning, his more than minimum wage there. But he does need some assistance from a job coach to, keep him on track, or, different things like that. And then eventually that supports come back and it becomes more natural. But, he does need some of that support sometimes when he's at a job. And that's okay. And it's okay because there are places like the Office of Vocational Rehab, OVR, that sometimes contract, depends where you are, how all of this works. So I'm not an expert on OVR. I know enough to get myself in trouble and to use it. David did utilize their services early on, right after he graduated. So he did receive some OVR services, and they lasted for, I think, maybe a year or two, maybe even 3 at the time. But then eventually he got into another system through the Office of Developmental Programs. But OVR is it's a nationwide federal state program, and you have to be eligible. But it does assist people with disabilities to basically try and help them define what kind of suitable employment is good for them. Now, working with the OVR, they have what's called an individual plan for employment. So it's an ITE. Of course, everybody's got their own acronyms. And it just really, they provide supports for people to come and become employed, but they also provide supports for students who go to college as well. So there is some money that they actually do pay for various things. I know books maybe sometimes. I don't think tuition, but various services that are available. So it's really important that, you have an OVR representative come to your IEP meetings, whether specifically when you're talking about transition at your IEP meetings, connect with your OVR rep, find out from the school, who is the OVR rep in your area, and, connect with them, get that information, or go to the transition conference and go to their table. All right. Another indicator is about independent living and community engagement. And this is really important because on the IEP, right, you got the 3 sections. We talked about employment, we talk about college, but then the third one is independent living and community engagement. And this looks very different for everybody, right? But it really baffles me, and I do scratch my head a lot for when I read an IEP. That's why I scratch my head just then. Is because I'll find sometimes statements in there that, IEP team decided, the person didn't need an independent living or community engagement goal. What? Really? Like, I think anybody, whether they have a disability or not, you need some kind of goal, right? If you're going to college, does your child know if they live on campus, what they need to do? How do they travel chain? How do they, navigate the community? Do they know how to get directions, things like that? money, financial management? Do they know how to, manage their money? Do they know about budgets? There's all kinds of things around living arrangements that you need to understand, like, rent. What does rent mean? What does filling out and signing a lease mean? There's different things that you could learn in school in that section around community living or living living independently. Another area when you're in that talking about transition is the communication, and assistive technology, right? Because there are a lot, sometimes a good number of students who communicate very differently, right? They may not use verbal, they may not, there's various ways that you communicate. What does that look like in transition? What is that going to look, if they use a communication device, what's that going to look like when you exit the school district? Is that something you own? How are you going to get it fixed? Who's going to program it? There's all kinds of questions that you need to be talking as an IEP team around transition when you're talking about communication and assistive technology. If you have a student or child that has goals around that or really needs to navigate that better, you really want to plan for the future around that. So we have this on here because you can't forget about that's so important around communication and any type of assistive technology. Oh, this is another area within the community and living arrangement. Are you even considering, are you thinking about, civic participation? Is your student and child, are they registered to vote? Where can they learn about it? Like these are things that, okay, what is voting? You could talk about voting, but then where do they learn about the issues and the candidates? If they want to learn about, political stuff, what do you do? How do you navigate that? How do you advocate? How do you know and understand your own rights of a person with a disability? What are disability rights? Things like that. How can you get more involved in your community? Or if they have a community center or the library, how do you get involved with these various associations? If you have, what is it? The council, like if you have some type of council in your area. And then, how do you get connected with all these different people? What's that look like? So, these are questions and things you can be talking about for your future and talking about it for the IEP section. And, you might come up with for a goal at some point too. Now we get into another great indicator, which is relationships, right? And relationships can be all kinds of different things, right? It could just be those meaningful activities that you do, as a young person, right? And all those different social and recreation opportunities. When you hit middle school and high school, there are so many different activities and things that students should be getting involved in and at the high school level. There's sports, there's, the plays. I've been seeing all kinds of things on Facebook with students and that have participated in their plays and had different roles in them. There's the band, there's, all kinds of wonderful opportunities, clubs, all kinds of clubs. Maybe start a club if you have an interest and there is no club, all kinds of wonderful things can happen when you're in high school. So really, talk about that at your meetings. And, if it's a school sponsored activity and they have some type of supports and they need supports, the school needs to provide that. Okay. But when you think about relationships too, you want to talk about what does healthy relationships look like, right? There's a lot. I will say that the state and PATN, the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, is really looking at healthy relationships. And what does that mean? It means talking about sexuality as well. And what does that mean? How do you navigate that as a person with a disability, right? I talked about that all the time when David was in school, because I knew that he needed to be exposed and taught all this. And I would, maybe go to a conference and bring curriculum, and curriculum wouldn't get used, Oh, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about sex. Nobody wants to talk about that, but you need to know and understand, how do you stay safe in sexual relationships and things like that. It can be, there are ways that you can talk about that in school. So just some other things that put in your, and if you go to that transition conference, I'm going to bet you there's probably a session or two about that. And there's probably a table there. So different ways that you can address, if you're not addressing it in the school system. You know, I talked earlier that sometimes individuals with intellectual disabilities, you know, will qualify for services through the Office of Developmental Programs. Now, when you're there, you get what's called an ISP, and that's what this is speaking about. And, you know, you can address a lot of those various social and recreational activities under that umbrella too. And that speaks to, through the Office of Developmental Programs, is where those waivers come in, right? One of those questions earlier was about waivers and, you know, how do you get waivers? Now, I'm not an expert on all that. I know you've got experts at the ARC that can do that. And usually what I do in my job is I send you to those experts. Now, I do have a colleague, Kelly King, and she is our family to family health coordinator, and she helps navigate all those various other systems as well. You know, she does know a lot about the waiver system, Social Security, and that's another one. I didn't even get to that one yet, right? You need to talk about that when you're in transition. And she also really knows a lot about the mental health systems and navigating that. But, you know, so there are various resources out there to help you navigate all this. You know, what's it like to provide or do transportation in the community? How do you get to those activities, and what does that look like, you know, if you don't drive? You know, David, you know, he does have various what they call habilitation support staff that he has, and we do what we call, I assist him in he is the employer, so he basically, you know, hires and fires his staff. You know, he what's called self-directs his supports and things like that. So, you know, these are things that you'll eventually get to learn. You don't need to learn that in school, but, you know, as you get connected to these various agencies, these are all the kinds of things that, you know, are out there for you to navigate. So I know I'm talking a lot at you again, and let me see, I can take a little bit of break if anybody wants to throw out any questions or anything like that. I'm happy to answer those, or we can always wait till the end as well. But I'm just going to continue here about talking about that advocacy. And when I talked about, you know, having your own set of files around transition, you know, keeping that notebook specific just for transition, you know, it's really important to navigate that and have all those names and numbers and the dates you talk to them, because, you know, they might say, oh yeah, we'll mail that out to you. And, you know, you don't get it and you forget, well, when was the last time I talked to that person? They were supposed to mail it to me, right? So, you know, things like that. So, you know, it's good to have a good book for that. Some other little tips are, you know, I always encourage families, you know, when I'm talking to them, take a friend to your IEP meetings or any of the other meetings. Having that extra ear, having someone to take notes for you and to compare, you know, at the end of the night and things like that. It's really important to do that comparison. And then, you know, like I said earlier, sometimes you just don't agree. You know, you might not agree with what the school is saying, or, you know, what way they want to support and how they want to support your student, your child. You know, so sometimes you do have to, you know, call the ARC or call the PEAL Center, and we can help you and guide you what those dispute options are that are out there. You always have a way to figure out what's the next step. What are my rights? But I do always encourage, you know, like, let's figure out, let's focus on that issue. What are we here for, you know? And I always like to bring it back to the student, right? Student focused, student driven. What are we doing for the student? Okay. And there are ways to be very assertive without being very aggressive. So as I'm getting closer towards the end here, just a couple reminders that, especially with transition, even with the best laid out plans, you know, lives will change, things will happen in the world. We had a pandemic, right? Those 2 years were like, whoa, what does that look like for transition? It was very, very different. But you need to remember you're not alone. You know, there are always somebody that you can call. And, you know, I always like, even though a lot of my work is around education and so forth, we get a lot of other, especially when you're in transition, there's all kinds of other questions. If I don't know, there's always somebody I can direct you to, and there's somebody else. There's always somebody out there that can help you. So you want to utilize all your resources and ask those questions. Don't ever think you have a stupid question. Always ask for help. So here are some of the other agencies that I referenced. I referenced the Social Security Administration, and these are just, again, there was that question around, what are some of the advantages of staying till you're 21? Well, some of these benefits and services, are available after 21, or sometimes even before. It really depends. Um, you know, I talked a little bit about OVR and ODP, but then there's the housing authority. What if you're looking to get on the list for, some housing assistance and things like that. So again, lots of different agencies and people to navigate this. And yes, I know I'm probably overwhelming many of you, but these are things we all needed to learn how to figure out what's going to work best for our child or our student. So I do have some more resources, but I do want to take a minute. And if you have a phone or a tablet and you're able to scan the QR code or that little thing there, scan me, QR, it is a QR code. That is our evaluation. So that's one way that you can answer our evaluation and let us know, if, how can, this be more beneficial to you, or what are some other things you're looking for the PEAL Center to do. So, but we also have a link there too. So when you get the PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on that link too. So I really would encourage you to take our evaluation, because earlier I talked about how we were federally funded and federally mandated. So that was, and Jessica had some of those questions because we're grant funded. So we need to tell our grantors, what we're doing, with the money that we're getting from them. So it's important for us to bring that data to them. But here are some more resources and different links for you for different websites. I already talked a lot about that transition discoveries guide in the beginning. But then there's also a transition healthcare checklist. And I didn't talk a lot about healthcare, but you know what? That's another transition phase. Does your child or student know how to, call and make themselves a doctor's appointment? What happens at that doctor's appointment? Do they know what to say? Do they know how to advocate for themselves? Do they know their body? Right? When I talked earlier about healthy sexuality, do they understand their body and the real words for different parts of their bodies and things like that, so that someone does not take advantage of them? So healthcare is really important to navigate and know what you need to do. So that's a great checklist for you. And then there's some other phone numbers there to help you and guide you through various information as well. The OVR is there, so you can find out what's that about. Here are some self-advocacy resources. Actually, my son David does sit on the board at the Self Advocates United as one. It is a self-advocacy board across the state. And they work directly with the Office of Developmental Programs, and they work directly with, the deputy there, Kristen Ahrens, and they talk directly with her, and they talk about what are the issues of people with intellectual disabilities. How are our services? What do we need to, what's going on as far as that there's a waiting list for services. What's that about? Things like that. There's also the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, and they're pretty active as well. So I really encourage your youth, or for you to check out, what does that mean? How can they get connected to other youth across the state? And guess what? They're at the Transition Conference. And then there's different autism groups out there. There's centers for independent living. And of course, your art chapters are there for resources. This is just some more resources around benefits planning if you need to plan for any type of benefits. And then, of course, for education, there's the PEAL Center. I talked a little bit about patent and the Education Law Center. And of course, your local ARCs as well are wonderful resources. So I thank you for your time tonight. This is various ways that you can reach the PEAL Center. We have our website, we have our info box, we have our phone number. So, feel free to outreach to us for anything that you might need assistance with. And I think that was my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing here so we can see if there's any questions and comments. I'm happy to stay on and answer any of those, or if you guys have anything else to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Diane, for this presentation. It was great to have this overview. I just want to mention that this is part one of a actually 3-part, but definitely 2-part series this month with PEAL. We'll be bringing Diane back on March 28th. To do part 2 of this and kind of really dive more into that transition grid of the IEP and how to set up all of these things that Diane mentioned this evening. Webinars, kind of thinking about employment, education, activities of daily living, and what we're going to be doing after school. How do we take all of that and put it into reality in the transition grid while a student is still in a public education or private or charter? So that's coming up on the 28th. I'll put in the chat the link to our website so that you can register for that. And then we do have another one coming up on April 12th, where we're going to continue to talk about transition and bring an attorney, and then Dr. C from East Stroudsburg to talk about kind of looking at the legal and the reality side of transitioning into adulthood. But thank you again, Diane. We're going to end the recording and open up for Q&A.